What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here with the Face Off Sports Network with my top starts and sits at the tight end position for NFL Week 11. We're going to start with the Bills. One of their tight ends, we're going to start this week. It's a matter of if Dalton Kincaid is active or if he sits, I still like Dawson Knox. Now, a little bit of context. Dalton Kincaid is not practicing Wednesday with the knee injury. It was a walkthrough practice. He injured his knee on Sunday's win against the Colts. But if Kincaid is up, I certainly like him against Kansas City. If he's down, I am willing to stream Dawson Knox. Now, Knox this week, he played 69 snaps to Kincaid's 24 against the Colts because of the aforementioned knee injury. And Knox had a solid day. He ended up catching 2 of 3 targets for 40 yards, 6 PPR points, his second highest total of the season. Of course, we know he plays behind Kincaid. There's not a lot of opportunities. But if he gets the call, if he gets the opportunity to be the guy this week, you absolutely have to start him against the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a few reasons why. Number one, Kansas City's defense, they are lights out. They are extremely stout against the run, and they also managed to shut down most wide receivers. However, against tight ends, the Chiefs are extremely leaky. They give up the second most PPR points to enemy tight ends at a rate of 16.4 points per game. They've given up 60 receptions for 698 yards and 3 touchdowns to the position. Not a lot of touchdowns, but a lot of receptions, a lot of yards, which means we should expect a high floor from Kincaid or Knox. Now, last week, Kansas City, they managed to shut down both Adam Troutman and Lucas Kroll. Together, they did combine for 8.5 PPR points. But in the weeks prior, we saw Cade Otton go off. We saw Brock Bowers bring a high floor to the table. We also saw George Kittle go for 6 for 92. So there's at least a high floor here. And this year at the tight end position, that's all we could really ask for. I expect one of these Bills tight ends, again, you're not using Knox if Kincaid is active. But if you have Kincaid and you need to pivot, go pick up Knox. He's going to bring a high floor. Normally, the tight end position is very fruitful against Kansas City, and we might even find a touchdown for one of these Bills tight ends this week. Buffalo's going to have to get creative. We know Keon Coleman's banged up. We don't know what's going on with Amari Cooper. I see this game being extremely Josh Allen-centric, and sometimes in these matchups, he'll go to his go-to guy who's been there for a long time, and that's going to be Dawson Knox. Next, we are going to start TJ Hockenson. TJ Hockenson is now entering his 3rd game back of the season. Last week, he began to cook. He saw 9 targets, hauling in 8 for 72. He played 38 offensive snaps in his 2nd game back from injury. Now, I don't love the matchup against Tennessee, but last week the usage was there. The usage was there enough to the point where I think they use him a lot again. It seems to me, now that TJ Hockenson's back into the mix, this offense is going to run through Justin Jefferson, TJ Hockenson in the passing game, obviously Aaron Jones in a running game. He's also going to catch passes. I think TJ Hockenson's reemergence really could limit guys like Jordan Addison and Jordan Naylor even more so. But Hockenson, he looks good. He looks like he has not skipped a beat. A little bit slow start in his first game back in week 9. He only had 4 targets, but he did catch 3 for 27. But what he did last week was extremely impressive. 8 yards per target. He did have 2 red zone targets, even though he didn't connect. In fact, he's had a total of 3 red zone targets in the past 2 games since he's returned. I'm going to ignore the matchup here. The matchup on paper against Tennessee, it is not good. Tennessee is one of the better teams in the NFL when it comes to shutting down tight ends. In fact, they've only allowed 2 tight ends to score over 12 PPR points or even in the double-digit PPR point range this season. But what we need to pay attention to, that it's not like these 2 guys scored the double-digit PPR points early. They have allowed double-digit points in the tight end position in 2 out of their past 3 games. Leading up to then, they did not allow a tight end to score in the double digits in the first 7 games of the year, the first 7 weeks of the year. And then all of a sudden, we see Laporta find the end zone, go for 16.8. And then we also see Hunter Henry find the end zone. He didn't go for, actually, he went for 12.6, didn't score. It was actually Brock Wright who scored that other touchdown in that Lions game in week 8, which was the big tight end week in fantasy football. But again, in 2 out of the past 3 games, 2 different tight ends over 12 and 2 tight end touchdowns. They didn't do either of that. They didn't allow either one of those statistics in the first 7 weeks of the year. I think this is a really nice spot despite the matchup for TJ Hockenson. Up next, final start, Pat Freiermuth. And Pat Freiermuth last week, 10.7 PPR points, his first game in the double digits since week 5 against Dallas. And this offense in Pittsburgh, it is cooking right now with Russell Wilson. They are throwing the football. Russ looks outstanding. In fact, last week was the first touchdown Freiermuth scored since week 5. He only had 3 targets, and volume is going to be an issue. In fact, Freiermuth, since week 4, has had 3 or under targets in every single game. So, yes, volume is going to be an issue. But again, I see the matchup against Baltimore. It's outstanding. Baltimore is the worst secondary in the NFL, and now they're going to probably be without Kyle Hamilton, their best defensive back. They're not going to be able to cover everything that Pittsburgh's going to be able to throw at them, whether it's Mike Williams in the second game, George Pickens, and now Pat Freiermuth in the red zone is probably going to be valuable. Here's a little bit nugget to chew on as well. Freiermuth last week, he only had 3 targets. 2 of them came inside the red zone. I foresee a similar usage from Pat Freiermuth this week. I actually think he gets back into the end zone against this Ravens defense. They can't stop the wide receiver. They can't stop tight ends either. Since week 6, every tight end they faced scored in the double digits outside of Troutman in week 9. That includes Tanner Hudson last week, David Njoku, Cade Otton, and Zach Ertz. 2 of them even found the end zone. So I love Pat Freiermuth to exploit an outstanding matchup in week 11. Remember, folks, if you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the alert icon so you can be notified anytime we are live, which is about 7 days a week, to answer your questions, or we drop videos just like this. If you have questions, trade questions, start sit questions, waiver wire questions, ask them in the comments below. Myself or one of my teammates will get back to you as soon as we can. Let's start closing this down with the sits. We're going to sit Evan Engram. Yeah, folks, Evan Engram, he's going to have opportunity, at least we think, but the opportunity it's probably not going to be great with Mac Jones under center. Now, I do a wide receiver start sit video. I do a running back start video, and Mike Hoff does the quarterback start video. I'm telling you to sit Brian Thomas Jr. The volume isn't there, and if he did get volume, it's not going to be quality volume. I kind of feel the same way about Evan Engram. And to be fair, Evan Engram in the past 2 games saw 8 and 10 targets. Last week with Mac Jones, he was targeted 8 times. He did give us a high floor of 10 PPR points. He caught 6 for 40. That was a middle-of-the-pack matchup. Now you get Detroit, and Detroit's the 3rd best team when it comes to containing tight ends. I get there's a world where Evan Engram gets 8 to 10 targets again. I just don't know if he's going to come down with the football. Mac Jones is going to have pressure in his face. He's going to be forcing the ball out, so the quality of targets probably going to be even worse for Evan Engram. And I get it. Evan Engram, in 5 games since he's week 6 return, he's been solid. 3 games in the double digits, 2 games over 8. But again, this is the toughest matchup he will face all season long up to this point. Detroit is so good. They don't allow many tight ends to get production. They've only allowed 1 tight end this year to finish with double-digit PPR points. That was A.J. Barner in week 4 against Seattle, and he scored a touchdown. In fact, it was the only touchdown they've given up to tight ends this year. Dalton Schultz came close last week to double-digit PPR points, 3 for 66. That 66 yards total was the highest total given up by the Lions to enemy tight ends. I do not love this spot for Evan Engram. We are going to sit him. We're also going to sit another player in another bad situation and bad offense, and that's my guy Jake Ferguson with the Dallas Cowboys. If you watch that Cowboys offense, it did not look good without Dak Prescott. In fact, it didn't even look that good with Dak Prescott this year. The offensive line with the 2 rookies is not protecting the quarterback. And we know Cooper Rush, when he looked good a few years ago, the defense was elite. The offensive line was still elite. That is not the same Cowboys team. They were able to run the ball a few years ago. Cooper Rush is going to be under duress. And if they don't go with Cooper Rush, we saw Trey Lance get in there, and he was an absolute mess as well. Last week, Ferguson, 5 targets, 4 for 24, only 6.4 PPR points. That is not good enough. And that was against Philly with the 4th toughest defense for enemy tight ends. And there was a lot of garbage time. When you're in that big of garbage time and your tight end can't find double-digit PPR points, kind of like, what are we doing? There's going to be better streamers out there for you than Ferguson this week, and the matchup is atrocious. We talked about how good Detroit is against tight ends. Well, Houston on Monday night, they are the number 1 team when it comes to containing enemy tight ends. They've allowed 2 tight ends to score in the double digits. Hunter Henry in week 6, Tucker Kraft in week 7. They both found the end zone. Last week, Laporta found the end zone as well, and he gives us 15. I made a mistake when I was just looking. So 3 tight ends in the double digits. But unless you're scoring against Houston, they don't give up a ton of yards. Outside of Laporta last week with 66, no other tight end gave fantasy managers more than 41 yards. No tight end has gotten us more than 4 receptions. And in fact, most this year are 3 or under against the Houston Texans. Normally, this defense is really good against the position, and now you get this Dallas team, this Dallas offense that is completely broken. We have to sit Cowboys fantasy assets moving forward, and that includes Jake Ferguson. We're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up with Cole Kmet. And Cole Kmet, the matchup isn't bad for Cole Kmet against Green Bay. Green Bay, they're kind of leaky against tight ends. I just don't trust this Bears offense right now. Despite on paper, Green Bay 23rd against enemy tight ends, there was some production to be had here normally, but we don't know what we're going to get from Chicago. Now, the good thing that they fired Shane Waldron, that could get the offense on track. I just don't know if it begins this week against the Green Bay Packers, whose defense has been pretty damn solid all season long. And when it comes to Cole Kmet, he had that one pop game in week 3 where he went for 25 fantasy points on 11 targets. He had the other pop game where he went for 24 against Jacksonville in week 6, but he only did that on 5 targets. Since that week 6 game, he's had here's the target numbers. He had 1 target against Washington, 0 against Arizona, and 4 last week against New England. He only caught 2 for 13. There's not a lot of volume here. And this is an offense. You have DJ Moore, you have Dunze, you have Keenan Allen, you throw the ball to Swift. There's a lot of mouths to feed. And I just don't know if I can trust Cole Kmet right now. I need to see this offense get better before I use Cole Kmet in my fantasy football lineups. Again, the matchup is there. We know Cole Kmet could pop for 20 at any time. It's just risky because he's either giving us 20 or it seems like he's giving us 4, which is why we are sitting Kmet with confidence in week 11.